tarot cards aren't usually the thing you see mentioned as a creative tool used by people during the creative process, but I want to talk about why, for me, in this specific project of mine, they are. The project is an album. It's a dungeon synth album that I've been working on. I've only completed side A so far, and that's taken several months, and I'll continue to work on side B. But the album is also designed to complement a book, and tarot plays a really important role in this. So what is tarot? Without getting into the whole, pop culture fortune telling thing, it's the OG pack of cards. And I'm showing you here, we've got Ace of Swords, we've got Pentacles, Knights, Queens, Kings. So these are like the faces of the cards we have today. We've got the number cards. Here we've got the 10 of Swords. So that's kind of like your 10 of Clubs or Spades. So we've already got this concept of suits through Swords, Wands, Cups, and Pentacles. We've got numbers and we've got face cards. But there's 78 cards in a tarot deck, as opposed to the normal 52. And that's because if we separate out the main bulk of cards that modern cards are inspired by, we're left with something called the Major Arcana, which are a set of named and uniquely, what would you call it? Uniquely arted, uniquely drawn set of cards here, which I believe is 22 of these. So I'm just going to lay them out so you can see them all. And these are really, really interesting because, there's a couple ways to think about these cards. There's a couple ways to use them. And one of those ways is to think of them a little bit like a story. There is some justification for thinking of them as a story, which I would get into, but maybe at a later time, maybe later in the video, or maybe in a follow-up video. But for now, think of them as a story. And what's quite interesting is that you can use this story to build your own narrative around. So here I've laid them out in order. And, the most obvious thing to do would be to look at the cards in order. So you've got the Fool, the High Priestess, so on, so forth. The Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress, and then you go on and on and on. Get through to cards like Death, the Tower, and then you end with the World. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything to you at the minute. And that's fine. But I think what's interesting is that you can use these cards as a template. So you lay them down and think of them as existing in a chronological order. They're beats of a story. Maybe they're chapters. Maybe they're sections. Maybe they're scenes. And by working with these cards, by studying them, you can sort of use them to help build symbols and ideas and concepts in your mind that fit with the story. And the reason that is possible is because the tarot cards are actually designed with a lot of very specific symbology in mind for Western audiences. So not so much if you're creating for an Eastern audience, but particularly for Western and Judeo-Christian audiences, tarot cards are absolutely packed with Western symbolism. And that's because they were created by a guy called Arthur Edward Waite. And he was a very, very interesting person, number one. On top of being a very interesting person, he was a Christian mystic, or I suppose you could say an esotericist, because he was also a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is one of those old school secret societies. It's not so secret anymore, but it is what you would call a closed initiation order. And that is an order of what in the modern day, and partly back then as well, were magicians. And not stage magicians, people who practiced different kinds of, let's say, spiritual magic. Now, he himself was not particularly interested in magic. He wasn't interested in practicing magic, learning magic, teaching magic, but he was interested in the same framework that the magicians were using to describe their practice, because this framework described the relationship between man and God. It described the relationship between individual and divinity. It described the relationship between microcosm and macrocosm. Anyway, to bring a line back to the point, the cards he created contain an enormous amount of meaning encoded for Western audiences. And in general, the themes of the cards explore very, very cosmic topics and experiences and narratives concerning individuals and the divine. So let's talk about the first and last cards, which are the Fool and the World, and we'll start with the Fool. So the Fool is 0, and numerologically, 0 means nothing, but that also means that it is the potential to be anything and everything. It is an amplifying number. If you have 1, a 0 on the end, multiplies that by 10, it becomes 10. 10 with another 0 becomes 100. So it's amplification, it's about expansion, it's about creation. So despite being nothing, it contains infinite potential, can be anything, and is about creation. It's nothing and everything at the same time. And the illustration on the card is this very sort of free in the moment looking figure who is arms out wide, embracing the world, looking outward beyond him. There is the sun in the corner. There is a clear yellow air behind him, a sort of terrain in the background that looks almost like mountains, but also possibly water, and he's standing on this earth. There's a flower growing out of his hand. There's this growth, there's this potential. And again, there's this potential growth and fertility on the green of his tunic and almost what looks like fruit there. And he looks ready to just go out, right? He's at the edge of this cliff. There's this expanse under and in front of him. He's light, he's free, he's carrying so little with him, like all of his belongings are just on this satchel, on this stick over his shoulder. And from popular culture, maybe you remember those cartoons, those kids' cartoons where a character is leaving home for the first time, going out into the big world, and they tie up all their belongings and a couple books into a little bit of fabric and tie it on the end of the stick and sling it over their shoulder. And that's this card. It is creation, potential. It is the beginning. It is this completely innocent, naive character about to go out into the world and do something, right? It is the hero who is about to embark on the hero's journey, who is about to face every card that is yet to come. And then skipping the rest of those cards and going straight to the end, we have the world. And here we have the man, the eagle, the bull, and the lion in the four corners. These are representative of the four elements: earth, fire, wind, and water. And we have this woman in the center who's holding two wands. She's surrounded by this sort of wreath of leaves. And the four elements represents everything coming together in one place. So all the four elements together are what create the physical world that we live in. And this duality of the one with the wands, there's a whole load of things that you can talk about these representing. The one that I find particularly interesting is the idea that it's the conscious or the subconscious, or the consciousness of herself and the consciousness of you, the person looking at the card. It's this understanding that the world that we live in, we're aware of our own existence, but we're also aware of the existence of the outside world. So we're aware of this separation between what's within and what's without. And that's the same with the bindings at the top of the wreath and the bottom of the wreath. That is the Hermetic philosophy of as above, so below, as within, so without. So this card is really about the completed work. It's the end of cycles, perhaps the beginning of something new. It is analogous to the Fool in that the end of a cycle is also the beginning of a cycle. So endings and beginnings here loop together and sort of become analogous. And both of these figures are sort of free and airy in their own sense. But whereas the Fool is about potential and the beginning of creation and the beginning of journey, the world is about the completed work and the end of a cycle, and that work manifest. So looking at this, you can sort of see how the Fool is perhaps representative of divinity, right? The Fool is almost like Genesis, the creation story, the beginning of everything. And the world is the end of the 7 days, it's the world, it exists, it's physical, it's reality, and there is man in this image. There is a woman here with two wands, and she is conscious and you are conscious, and she knows that she is her and she is separate from her environment. And exists in a world of elements and physicality. So if you imagined the journey sort of from heaven to earth, if you want to think of it that way, you're going from the Fool, from 0, through to this 22nd card, right? So what would be the experience of someone in the world trying to aspire to know divinity? Well, it would actually be the reverse. It wouldn't be 0 to, the 20, or the first to the 22nd card, 0 to 21. You would be going the other way. You would be going from someone who is in the world, as we all are, and you would be trying to go towards the Fool. That's the direction that you would follow this story in if you were looking at some sort of like ascent towards heaven. I'm speaking very abstractly here, but that's the journey you would go on. So most stories actually follow the hero's journey or the fool's journey, where you start with this naive character who's very innocent, that goes into the world. A load of things happen. There's conflict, there's drama. Death appears in the middle of the deck, which is really interesting because you might intuitively think death would be at the end, but it's not. It's in the middle. And I want to do a whole other video on this perhaps, but the Fool at some point will die. Not die and that's the end of the story, but at some point they will have to give up something, right? They'll have to burn away the deadwood. They'll have to kill their old self, or their old self will have to die so that a new self can be born, right? That's newfound purpose, newfound power. They have to travel into hell to achieve their ultimate aim and come back out unscathed and sort of rebuilt. So it's a sort of spiritual death. It's a psychological death that transforms the Fool in the middle as they travel towards the world, which is the completion of the story. It's the completed work. It's the aim realized. So most heroic stories follow that path. And what I wanted to do with this album and the book that I intend to write and am writing around the album, I want to look at the opposite direction. I want to explore the process of physicality dying and in the process reaching towards the divine, sort of drifting away from physical reality and going into something more spiritual or more psychological. So I want to go backwards through the story, and I want to build a story that goes from the world to the Fool in the reverse direction, hitting each card along the way. That is the high level, and I could go on and make more videos about how each potential chapter or each song relates to these cards. And if you guys want to see that, then then let me know and support the video, and I will do that as I continue to create side B of the album.